Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rocha Lima.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast is brought to you by Holland Harlan Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harlan Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm joined today by Karen Powell. Karen is the Managing Director of The Creative People, a graphic design firm with extensive experience in all aspects of design and production. Karen is also the creator of Salmon Magazine, which is described as the magazine for an ethical and informed Kingston. What's unique about Karen is how she uses her business expertise to promote and support local causes that are close to her heart, creating some really interesting synergies between local businesses and local charities. So whether you're interested in knowing more about how to become a more ethical shopper, supporting local shops through the Kingston Pound, or want to know more about how your business could support local charities, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Karen Powell, to the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm really excited about this conversation because, to me, it seems like you've created an interesting link between the business world locally and local charitable causes that you're involved in too. And I'd really like to know more about that. But to kick this conversation off, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So where did you grow up, Karen?
Hi. Well, I grew up in Kingston. I've always lived here. I feel very connected to it. My first job was in Bentwalls, so I've always lived around here. I love it. We've got the river, we've got the green spaces, quirky independent shops and the market, and if we want to go up to town, there's a fast train link from Surbiton, so we've got everything here that I could want.
Absolutely. And what did you study at college or university?
I studied art, design,
okay.
Graphics.
Yeah. And how did you move on from that into your graphic design business?
Well, in my 20s, I worked for a couple of large agencies in London, had some really good clients, blue chip clients, and worked really hard and learnt a lot about the business. But then my daughter came along, and it was quite hard to sustain that sort of lifestyle of working up in town, long hours. Quite a lot was expected of you, especially in the design business. You have lots of deadlines to meet. So I decided to find work nearer home. So I found a job in Kingston, and it worked really well for me. And a small design company in Kingston, and so that's led me to where I am now.
Fantastic. And today you have your own graphic design business called The Creative People. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, The Creative People started as a partnership in Kingston. It was run by two people when I first went to work there, who have subsequently, one had to retire from ill health and the other's retired because he's got to that age. So basically, I've taken over running the business.
Oh, okay.
So The Creative People have been going for about 25 years.
Wow.
And yes, I took over running the business about 5 years ago.
And what sort of projects do you get involved in? Could you give us just a flavour of some of the work you've done?
Very, very varied. We've worked for large corporate companies. We've done work for the Inland Revenue, local businesses. We worked for Kingston First when they were the first business improvement district in the country. It was an American idea, and they were voted in. So we worked with them for the first 10 years that they're in existence. I think they're in their third term now of 5 years. They've just been voted back in, which is great. Also been very involved with Kingston Chamber of Commerce. We designed their website and done marketing for them. I was actually on the board for 4 years of the chamber.
Oh, wow.
So that's where I'd made a lot of my contacts and with businesses and local charities. So I'm very well connected in the borough.
And Karen, I understand that some of our listeners are students at Kingston University and the Kingston Business School. And I know that university offers many courses, including courses in art and graphic design. So before I move on to talking about some of the other businesses and courses you're involved in, would you mind helping our listeners understand, in your view, what is the role of graphic design and how perhaps somebody that is studying art today could get involved in graphic design as a career?
It's very important because there's a lot of businesses out there who don't actually market themselves very well, and I think a good graphic designer can kind of look at a business and recommend and sort of see what their USP is, like the unique selling point, and everybody has that. So I think if you can find that USP and create a graphic or a strap line or something that could convey the message of what the company does, it just makes them stand out and it makes people want to use that business. So if you've got a good branding, that's very important to your business.
And for art students and graphic design students who are thinking about a career in graphic design, what do you see as some of the changes that are coming up for this field in the future?
Well, there's lots of changes happening. Obviously, social media, a lot of businesses are relying on social media now for their marketing rather than sort of traditional ways. I still believe there's opportunities to market yourself on both platforms, both print, where online and social media. I think you need to cover all your bases, but obviously it depends on who your customers are and what age range they are. But just get involved, offer to help businesses, perhaps offer to help if you've got some ideas, follow them on social media, give them some ideas. If there's competitions, enter every competition you can, because if you win, then that raises your profile in the design in the design business. And just get involved. Go out there, network, speak to people, and don't be frightened to show them your designs, because everybody has got something to offer. And just promote yourself, whether it's on social media or through your college or networking, however you can.
Karen, I'd like to know a little bit more about some of the other business ventures you're involved in. You also produce Salmon Magazine, which is described as a magazine for the ethical and informed Kingston. Could you tell us a bit more about this project?
Salmon Magazine came from a chance meeting with Andrew Connolly, who is the director of the Kingston Pound. Kingston Pound is our local currency, which is there are many local currencies around the country. The idea behind local currencies is to encourage people to shop wisely and sustainably, to think about how they're shopping, because if we all carry on shopping online, then obviously the local shops will close. In fact, one in 8 shops on the high street have actually closed in the last year, wow, which is quite a lot. So we're just trying to encourage people to use their local independent shops, because once they're gone, and it will be very sad, and it will have an effect on our community, the way we live, and our lifestyles. And so the Kingston Pound is very important to me, and I believe in it. I believe in the local currency idea. So to try and market the Kingston Pound, I suggested to Andrew that we could perhaps have a marketing campaign, produce some advertising. But actually, it's a community interest company, and it's run with zero marketing budget. So I had the idea that perhaps we could produce a magazine or a newsletter to let people know about it. And the only way we could produce that was for it to be self-funded. So by selling the advertising space pays for the production of the magazine. Andrew kind of said, well, that's a good idea, perhaps we'll produce a magazine one day. And I thought, no, let's do it now. So we launched it just under 2 years ago, and we're now on issue 6. So I'm quite pleased with the way things are going.
That's fantastic. And what sort of articles are you looking for the magazine?
Well, I'm looking for articles because I want to be very ethical with it. It's not religious, it's not political. We haven't got any hidden agendas. We just want to encourage people, as I say, to be sustainable in their shopping. But not only that, obviously, there's been a big movement since the David Attenborough's Blue Planet to encourage people to stop using plastic, to think about shopping more and living more sustainably, whether it's cutting down on single-use plastic or single-use fashion. Just trying to be more sustainable in many ways. So that's what we're trying to do with the magazine. The latest issue has got an article about plastic in the bathroom, about suggestions about cutting down on plastic in the bathroom. But we're also trying to support local charities as well, trying to give charities a voice, because there's a lot of charities in Kingston that people don't know about and not aware of. So the magazine, again, is giving us the opportunity to highlight all the good work that's being done in our local community and trying to pull the community together and encourage businesses to support local charities as well.
I love the way this is part of this connection that I meant at the top of the show, that you seem to have a knack for making, which is uniting the business community with an ethical idea, and then using business again in the form of a magazine that includes paid for advertising to be able to talk about and publicize the ethical and the local community aspect of the causes that you're passionate about. With that in mind, I understand that you've actually created a link between the Kingston Pound and Love Kingston, our local charity here. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. Well, I was invited to be an ambassador for Love Kingston about 3 years ago, and I thought it was a great idea. All the other boroughs in London have a fund that they're building on that helps and supports people in the borough that vulnerable people that need some help. So I thought, well, Kingston didn't have a fund like this 4 or 5 years ago, so I thought we need to support this and tell people about it. Then when I got involved with the Kingston Pound, I kind of linked. I thought, well, it's all about Kingston. We've got Love Kingston, Kingston Pound. These two need to be joined somehow. So I introduced the Love Kingston to the Kingston Pound, and now Kingston Pound supports Love Kingston, and 1% of every business transaction that's done on the Kingston Pound app actually goes back to Love Kingston, and also we support them with the magazine, and I help at functions and just help to support them generally and just get the word out there about them. But if you were to buy something on your credit card, I think you pay about 2.5% back to the credit card company. Whereas if you buy something with your Kingston Pound app, then that's just 1% that goes to a charity. So it kind of makes sense to me that people would prefer, hopefully, to use Kingston Pounds and know that one penny in every pound is going back to a local charity to build a fund for the community.
Karen, given your vast connections in the borough, not only in the business community, but also with local causes, could you just tell us about some of your favourite things in Kingston, be them causes, be them shops, or be them places?
I could tell you loads. I could be here all day telling you, because I've met such lovely people since I've been running the magazine, well, and before. But for example, about a year ago, I went into Winkworth's estate agents in Surbiton. I was chatting to them about possibly advertising in the magazine. And they asked me, they said they'd noticed a lot of homeless people around Surbiton Station, and they asked me what was being done about this. So I told them about Kingston Church's Action on Homelessness, which is another local charity which is very close to my heart. And I actually put them in touch with Kingston Church's Action on Homelessness, which is KCAH for short. And then Winkworth decided to support KCAH. They ran a quiz night at Langley's, which is a local independent restaurant. They raised about £600 for the charity. They sponsored an advert in Salmon Magazine to help to raise awareness of the charity, and they've just been very supportive, which I think is great, because it's an estate agents, which is all about providing us with homes, linking up with a homeless charity. So it's all about homes, and it just shows that they've got corporate social responsibility by helping them, and that's what I thought. I think that's the way forward. I want to try and encourage businesses that think that they'd like to help charities, but they don't really know how to. So by getting involved, by putting on events or supporting it through the magazine, then I think that's a win-win for the charity and the local businesses.
Karen, where does the name Salmon come from for the magazine?
Okay, lots of people ask this. So about 1,000 years ago, at the times of the Doomsday Book, there were 3 salmon fisheries in Kingston where the bridge is now, I believe. They weren't fisheries as we know them now. They would have just been nets across the river, but there were 3 salmon fisheries. And those 3 salmon fisheries were represented in our medieval crest, in Kingston's crest, that you can see all around the town still. It's on the Guildhall, it's on the bridge, it's in lots of places around the town. So people don't really realise that, the link. But sadly, in the Industrial Revolution, the river got really polluted and all the salmon died. And in the 1980s, I believe, the Environment Agency tried to reintroduce salmon into the river. So they took salmon eggs from the Scottish hatcheries, they released them at the source of the Thames. The eggs hatched, the salmon all swam down the river, went out to sea, but salmon go back to where they're born to spawn, and because they didn't have it in their DNA, I believe they all went back to Scotland, although I don't know.
Got it.
And they didn't come back to the river. So sadly, we won't, as far as I know, unless there's a scientific intervention, we won't have salmon in the river again. So what we're kind of saying is if we don't support our local shops and our local businesses, they will close up, they will be bulldozed down, possibly never to come back again, a bit like the salmon, and that would be very sad.
That's fascinating. When you look back at your career to date, Karen, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm proud of running my own business and publishing my own magazine. I think it's taken a lot of hard work, and I don't have a huge team behind me, and we don't get any funding for the magazine. So I think the fact that I've actually got past the first couple of issues, I feel quite proud of that, and hopefully it's quite nice now. People recognise it. I take it into shops or pubs or places, and they say, "Oh, yes, Salmon, the latest one," and they pick it up straight away and want to read it. So that's great. It's not just left collecting dust. People actually do pick it up and want to read it. So
absolutely,
it's quite nice.
Yeah, and it is a great magazine. If any of the listeners haven't picked it up yet, you'll see it all around Kingston, and it really is. There's some interesting articles, and it highlights some important issues for the town as well.
Another business that is very supportive of the Kingston Pound scheme is Wags and Tails in Surbiton, and they're very community minded. They have lots of charity nights. They raise money for charity. They also support Surbiton Hockey Club, and so that's how they give back to the community as well. So I really want to encourage that. I want to encourage more restaurants, businesses to support local groups, whether they're charities or youth groups or sports facilities, because it's all important to our community, and that's what makes Kingston such a great place to live.
Karen, what next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
Well, I'm looking to grow the magazine at the moment. It's taking up a lot of my time and energy. So this is what's keeping me focused at the moment. What I'd like, in an ideal world, I'd love to find a really good sponsor for the magazine, whether it's an electric car company or renewable energy, or just a company that could help to sponsor it and would work well with what we're trying to do. Because obviously I love supporting all the local businesses and telling their stories, but local independent businesses don't have huge marketing budgets to place adverts and pay for advertorials. So to make the magazine sustainable, I really need to find a good sponsor for it. And electric cars are becoming more and more interesting now, and lots of people have questions about them. I mean, I've got lots of questions. I'd like to know how long you can drive it before it needs recharging, how many charging points there are in Kingston, how safe it is, whether the battery is going to explode. So I just feel that these are things that other people want to know, and if we want to create a cleaner environment, clean air, then we should be looking at alternative modes of transport, and we could tell that story in the magazine.
As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick-fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So firstly, Karen, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
Well, I spend a lot of time sitting in front of my computer, so when I'm relaxing, I just like to get out in the open. I love to go for walks in our local parks. We're so lucky. We've got Richmond Park, Bushy Park, we've got the river, we've got some lovely places just to go out and enjoy the countryside and nature.
Who are some of the people you admire and why?
Well, I really admire Greta Thunberg, I think that's how you pronounce it. She's the amazing 16-year-old activist with Asperger's who's really speaking out about climate change and making everybody really aware of it. I understand she's taking a sabbatical from school next year to travel to New York to attend the UN summit on climate change. This is no mean feat, really, as she refuses to travel on planes because of the impact of aviation on the environment. So I really, really admire her for what she's doing at such a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a book that you've recently read that you would recommend to our listeners?
I read a lot, actually. I'm a member of a book club. So one that stands out that I recently read is The History of Bees by Marja Lunde. It's really interesting because it's set across 3 centuries and tells the story of 3 families who are related, but they have different relationships with the bees. And it paints a really bleak future where people are having to sit in the trees and pollinate flowers with paintbrushes as the bees have all disappeared. And I understand this is actually happening now in parts of China, which is really scary. And it just goes to remind us that we all need to do our bit to save the bees, because if we don't have bees in the food chain, then it will be absolutely disastrous. And so we must all go out, plant flowers, don't cut your lawn, let it go to clover, just support the bees, because we need them.
Is there a movie or a TV series that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yes, I recently watched Years and Years, which I thought was really intriguing. It covered so many different subjects and aspects of the way the future could go, and I found it very scary, but some of it is actually becoming true already, even though they've only just made it. And it was set a few years in the future, but some of the things are happening now. So I think everybody should watch that series because it really struck a chord with me.
Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
So we've got a website, thecreativepeople.co.uk. We've got our own office. And if you want to find out more about Salmon, then you can have a look at social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram. The magazine's available to pick up in many of the local cafes and independent shops in Kingston. It's also at the Rose Theatre and the local libraries and Kingston Museum, and many local hotels and leisure centres also have it in there. At the moment, we're producing 3 a year, but I'm hoping to increase that to 4. But it's great because it's got a long shelf life, and if people want to advertise events, then it's quite good because it's not out of date as soon as it's come out.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, I'll make sure that I link up all those resources on the show notes. Karen, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.